everybody, my name is Spartan Tyler and today we have a boss ranking. The inaugural boss ranking game for this channel will be River City Girls. It is a beat 'em up style game that is a spin-off of the Kunio-kun series. It has 7 different bosses and today we're going to rank them. We're going to be taking into account the difficulty, fairness, mechanics, design, placement of the boss, and the overall fun factor. With that said, I will be very biased, this is my opinion, and I'm coming as someone who does not play very many beat 'em ups. Now, enough with the intro, let's go ahead and get right into number 7. Starting off our list on number 7, we have a Bobo. Someone has to start at the bottom, and for me, it's a Bobo. There's nothing inherently wrong with the fight, but I found it underwhelming in creativity, difficulty, and the execution of its mechanics. The hardest part about the fight is his health bars. Most of his attacks are easily telegraphed and countered based off of the way they're actually executed in the game. He leaves plenty of moments for you to get him stuck into a combo into a couple ground stomps. The only attack I ever had trouble with was his spin into a ground slam attack. After phase 1 ends, he starts slamming the ground with a shockwave that you have to jump to dodge and starts bringing down rocks from the ceiling. The small rocks are easily dodged. I've never been hit by them once in any of my playthroughs. He also drops these giant rocks that he can pick up and throw at you. This is where the fight actually gets easier as the phases go on. He tunnel visions himself and goes straight towards these rocks, leaving you the open moment to just beat down on him. This leaves so much opportunity for you to just get in a bunch of free hits and free combos. You can pick up the other rocks that he drops down, but there's actually no use when you could just beat him up for trying to pick them up himself. I feel like there's a lot more potential that could have been with this fight, whether it be throwing the big rocks at him or getting him to smash the rocks onto himself. Third phase introduces this whole sucking in Kirby-esque attack, which is just dodged by running in the opposite direction. I've gotten hit by it a few times sadly, but it is actually very easily countered. There's nothing bad about this fight that I can see, but it doesn't hold up with its execution of mechanics and doesn't compare to the other entries on this list. Coming in for number 6, we have Mizu. This boss has the unfortunate circumstance of being the first boss in the game. This means it's not going to be very difficult or creative in any sense of the word, but is more to be a teaching moment to help you aid throughout the rest of the game. And that's exactly what it does. There's nothing inherently unique about her attacks, but she leaves very wide open windows for you to take advantage of and deal damage. This combined with her small health bar leaves in a lot of room for you to shred her health. She does punish over-aggression however, which can be a very useful tool. Later on in her phases, she'll start mixing in more attacks and being able to jump around the arena without being hit. This also teaches for other future boss fights where you're going to have to focus more on defense and dodging around the arena rather than pure on offense and beating down on the boss. There's nothing unique or difficult about the fight in itself, but it is filled with purpose as being a teacher for helping you with the rest of the game and most importantly going through its boss fights. Coming in at number 5 we have Yamada and the start of the list where I genuinely enjoy every fight from here on out. This was an interesting fight to place being as on my first playthrough I nearly died to him, but on every other playthrough it being extremely easy by comparison. His moveset is fairly limited, going for a few combos and mostly relying on his invisibility, teleport, dark arts, magic combo. This is the majority of his moves and is ironically what almost killed me the first time I fought him. Every playthrough afterwards I realized once he goes invisible you can just jump right behind him and get some free hits in. After the first phase is over he starts sewing in objects to damage you. Before he sends them out they can be destroyed however, and one of the items he summons will be a healing item. This is also the only boss fight where the arena poses its own threat, being as you could fall off, but it is balanced by the fact that you can knock him off as well. His third phase doesn't add much by making the entire screen black, besides both of your sprites. This really doesn't add much of any danger however, as the edges of the building are small and you should be able to know when you're going to fall off or not. This fight was hard on my first playthrough for whatever reason, but every other playthrough it was more of a wash and only me taking a couple hits here and there. It has some interesting mechanics that can reward observation such as patterns with the teleport and healing items when he summons them, but it isn't very difficult every time you fight him afterwards. First timers can be in for a slightly troublesome experience and the fight is relatively enjoyable. Coming in for number 4 we have Sabuko, the final boss of the game. This was a conflicting choice for me, but I feel that this fight is a good place right here. Its highs are very high when it peaks, but when it has its lows it is fairly low and introduces things that shouldn't be in a final boss. The first phase isn't all too bad, her only noticeable thing being able to interrupt your combos, blocking very often, and having long combos that can damage you fairly well. The first issue that arises with this fight is when you get her down to her first phase. Once you take down that chunk of her health, she just jumps up to the top of the arena while you have to beat down on 2 regular Yakuza soldiers. This is the only boss that just decides to leave the fight and leave you to your own devices against these 2 regular enemies. This point is made even further by the fact that you don't even have to actually fight them. She ends up dropping down eventually and killing both of them trying to damage you. This makes this whole entire section feel relatively useless and more time consuming if anything. It doesn't add much to the fight, and being the final boss, I don't see why this is the only one that happens to do this. After her first phase, she introduces new elemental attacks to come at you with. They are pretty good in most of them, and I feel like they add a lot of variety to the fight where you have to not only dodge but also get in some damage for yourself. The only attack I ever have an issue with is this one water attack where she swipes her sword and makes a little bouncing water ball go out. It feels odd because of the invincibility frame she gets and how the animation works. Otherwise, I find that the elemental attacks are actually a really good addition to the fight. This is also only one of 2 bosses that actually has a 4th little section of health once you kill her. Or so you think you kill her. This is where she's at her strongest, throwing elemental attacks very often and blocking extremely frequently, interrupting most of your multi-hit attacks. This boss has plenty of unique and difficult mechanics to juggle in combat, but I can't help but feel that there could have been more to it. Being the final boss and all, I expected more, and I expected less of this whole fight a bunch of random enemies while you can't do anything to the boss. It's a really good boss that feels really good when you're getting in a one-on-one duel against her, but has the burden of these odd inclusions that don't feel. Coming in at number 3, we have Noise, and every boss from here on out I really enjoy and wouldn't change much about. This boss is divided into 2 sections, the first one being a reverse Guitar Hero sections where you dodge the incoming notes that'll damage you. Initially they don't do too much and they're not too overwhelming, but later on you can take a lot of damage before you can even land a hit on Noise. Once you're done with this section, you get to her damage phase. This is where she's actually on the ground doing attacks, albeit at a limited moveset. She has this whole scythe throw thing where she dashes and her scythe will follow her in the line that shows on the ground. She also has a close range side swipe, but in terms of her moveset, that's about where it ends. She summons in these fans that will come around, and they aren't very much of a nuisance. In comparative to the other bosses who summon enemies, these are the weakest easily. They don't even knock you down or nothing. And that's one of the few issues with this fight. The adds that she does bring in are not very overwhelming in any sense of the word, and her moveset is very limited by comparison to other boss fights. Once she's done with her whole dashing sideswipe thing, there isn't much for her to defend herself with. Going by the rest of the fight though, I find it extremely enjoying. Dodging the notes is very difficult in later stages, but feels fair. It never feels like I got hit for no reason, or even in the damage phase, I never felt like anything was too much for me to handle. It's all a matter of being able to juggle along what is being thrown at you, and then being able to return with your own aggression. I really enjoy this fight and the mechanics that it brings, being a very unique experience that also has a very fitting theme with the boss itself. I really enjoyed this boss fight with really unique and overwhelming mechanics that can make for a very fun boss that can beat you before you can even get a chance to land a single punch on her. Coming in for the very close second, we have Hibari. This is one of my favorite fights and is barely contending for first. There isn't many ways I'd even improve on this boss fight. It is a very unique experience and one person in this game that I have ever died to. The only time I caught a death in this game over my entire playthroughs was to this boss fight. Her arena is a 2D landscape that you can only move side to side or up and down on, which is very limiting in movement compared to any other area in the game. She starts by shooting these different energy balls that behave in many different ways, such as in a wide area near her, or ones that will spawn over the arena to track you down. She also summons 2 enemies on both sides of the arena that aren't very hard to kill but can be very annoying in her later phases when there's a lot of high damaging abilities going out. The only way to damage her is to get her to shoot a needle at you so it can be bounced off the wall onto her, which knocks her down and gives you a bunch of free damage. Well, this is one of the issues that I find with the fight, one of the very few issues however. If you just stand in the corner, she's just gonna hit herself every time no matter where she is. I would have wished that there was more variety to get her down, whether it be different attacks to hit her with, or just moving around during this phase where she's throwing out the needle. Once she's fallen, you have ample time to beat down on her until the next phase. Phase 2 and 3 introduce new attacks, ones that damage more and last longer. The most important one that gets introduced is in phase 2, which is the needle lasers. Once she shoots out these needles, they're going to show up in a line around the arena, and after a set amount of time, they'll actually fire out lasers that are very high damaging. She also summons in these flying head helmet things that can explode. They die in one hit, but they can blow you up and send you careening right into one of these death lasers. This fight is extremely good in my opinion, and is a perfect balance that never feels too unfair. You have to be on point with your dodges during her phases where she's invincible, but it's also comboed by the fact that you just get to beat down on her once you're past her phases. This fight is amazing and unique in some of the best ways possible, and one is almost a contender for being my favorite fight in the game. For my number one favorite boss fight in River City Girls, I don't think there's a better choice besides the secret final boss, Hasabe and Mami. After all the torment that these two girls will put you throughout the main game, you get the chance to beat them into the ground. Difficulty wise, this fight is up there with the likes of Sabako. Both girls on their own are very formidable, sporting long, hard-hitting combos and blocking as often as Sabako does. This is enhanced by this being the only gank fight in the game, pitting you against both of them at once. This was an open for a great balance decision, however, as they have a shared health bar. This means catching them in the same combo, multi-hit attack, or stomp will absolutely chunk their health bar. Once her first phase is down, you get to have them have duo attacks against you. There's only 2 from what I saw through my playthroughs, but they not only hit very hard, but are pretty hard to dodge in their own right. This is also balanced by having wide moments of reprieve once they are done or you interrupt them. This is also one of the other 2 bosses, being Sabako, which a 4th health bar. Once you finally beat the boss, and whatever girl you last hit will end up quote unquote dying and becoming a spirit. This leaves you fighting a powered up version of the standing girl and the spirit girl. The powered up girl will have very long combo chains that hit like a truck if they connect fully, and the only way to do damage is to hit the spirit girl. The one that's a spirit can also defend itself with an array of different ranged attacks. The other girl who's powered up can be knocked down, but they are otherwise invincible for this phase. This fight is not very easy, but also has some very cool mechanics such as duo attacks and the spirit girl, which make the fight very unique. Although I never died to the boss, it contends with some of the hardest in the game. The only change I could ever think would be changing the stage, adding variety of duo attacks, and what the attacks that the spirit girl can do. Otherwise, it's a near perfect boss fight that only beats out Hibari for me and feels like a very fitting conclusion to the game, being able to beat down on these untouchable rivals who have been taunting you since the beginning of the game. That does it for this boss ranking. If you haven't played this game, which I would assume most people haven't, go ahead and try this game. I would highly recommend it. And if you have, let me know what your thoughts on the bosses are and your personal opinion for each boss fight. Otherwise, I will see you guys next time, hopefully with some more videos similar to this, like boss rankings, gaming challenges, whatever. Until then, I will see you guys later.